The house was demolished on a Thursday morning. By noon there was nothing left of it but dust, broken brick, and a hole where the servant's stair had been. But 3 weeks later, the door we salvaged from that stair started knocking from the other side. At first, my brother Tomas said it was the wood settling. Then he started making tea for 2. Then I heard him talking to someone behind a door that had no wall, no room, and no house left behind it. And whatever was answering him was not trying to get out by force. It was asking him to be kind. That was how it fed. My brother Tomas kept a door in the back of his workshop for 2 years, and it did not belong to any wall, and I am the one who finally took it out to the river, and I need to tell it from the beginning, because the beginning is the only part where anyone still had a choice. We ran a salvage business together, Tomas and I, out of a brick unit on Faro Street in the old Tannery District, a part of the city that had been dying, and then, the way these places do, started filling up again with young people and coffee and the noise of it. Our block was loud and alive. There was a bakery 2 doors down, a bicycle shop across the road, a woman upstairs who sang scales badly every morning, and all day the traffic, and the delivery vans, and the school letting out at 3. I want that on the record, that we were not in some lonely place, because when I tell people what happened, they always want it to have happened somewhere far away and quiet. And it did not. It happened in the middle of everything, with the city going on outside the door, which is a strange way to put it, because the door is the whole story. The salvage trade is simple to describe and hard to do well. When a building comes down, most of it becomes rubble. But some of it has value or beauty or history, and someone has to go in before the machines and take those pieces out. Mantelpieces, iron railings, stained glass, old-growth timber, hardware you cannot buy anymore. Tomas had the eye for it. He could stand in a condemned house and see the one banister worth saving among 100 that were junk. I did the books and the hauling and the selling, and he did the seeing, and for 11 years it worked, because he saw and I sold, and neither of us could have done the other's half. The building it came from was a house on Aldous Row, a tall, narrow terrace house scheduled for demolition to make way for the tram extension. It was a good job, a rich old house, and the demolition company had given us 3 days to strip what we wanted before they brought it down. Tomas loved that house. He came home from the first day of it, lit up in a way I had not seen in a while, talking about the plaster ceilings and the servant's stair and a set of doors on the top floor that he said were the finest he'd handled in years, mahogany, hand-carved, hung on their original brass. He wanted all of them. We took what we could over the 3 days, and on the last afternoon, with the machines already idling in the street, he went back up alone for one last door, the one at the very top of the servant's stair, a plain, narrow door, not grand at all. And that is the one he came down carrying, and that is the one that never left us. I remember teasing him about it, because he had passed over the beautiful carved doors and come down cradling this plain little servant's door like it was a child. He had a strange look. He said the floor plan the demolition company gave us, the one they mark up to show what's load-bearing, had this door on it, at the top of the servant's stair, but that when he'd gone up, the plan showed the stair ending in a blank wall, no door, and yet there the door was, in front of him, in a frame, in a wall, and he'd found it funny, the plan being wrong, and had brought the door down partly as a joke about it. He laughed when he told me. That is the only time the paper comes into this at all, and I only mention it because it is where I first saw the look cross his face. The plan says one thing, and the wall says another. And he laughed, and I laughed, and we loaded the van, and the machines took the house down the next morning while we were having breakfast, and we heard it come down from a mile away, the long, low crumble of it, and thought nothing of it, and drove to work. Tomas put the door in the back of the workshop, leaning against the wall, the way we stored everything, and for a few weeks it was just stock. It was a plain door. Nobody wanted it. The carved mahogany doors sold within the month to a hotel restoration, good money, and the plain servant's door sat in the back leaning against the brick. And I forgot about it, and I would have gone on forgetting about it, except that Tomas did not. The first thing I noticed was that he had hung it. He'd built a freestanding frame for it, a heavy timber frame like a doorway with no wall, and he'd hung the door in it properly on its original brass hinges so that it stood upright in the middle of the back of the workshop, a doorway you could walk all the way around, a door to nowhere standing free on the concrete floor. I asked him why, and he said he wanted to see it hung the way it was meant to hang, to appreciate the joinery, which was the kind of thing he said about pieces he loved. So I let it be. It was, I thought, a craftsman's fussiness, a beautiful bit of hanging on a plain door, but he kept it closed. That was the second thing, and it took me longer to notice, because why would you notice a closed door? But a freestanding door frame, a doorway with no wall, the natural thing is to leave it open, or to swing it as you pass, because there is nothing on the other side. It is just air, the same workshop air on both sides. And Tomas kept it shut. He'd built a little brass catch to hold it shut, and once, early on, I went to open it, just to swing it idly the way you would, and he came across the workshop faster than I have ever seen him move and put his hand flat on the door and said, "Don't." And then, seeing my face, softened it into a joke, said he'd only just got the catch set right and didn't want it knocked loose. But his hand stayed on the door until I stepped back. I want to be honest that for a long time I thought this was about grief, or about age, or about the strange private rituals a person develops. Our mother had died the year before. Tomas had taken it hard, harder than me. He was the one who'd nursed her at the end, and I thought, a man loses his mother, and then a year later he becomes peculiar about a door, and I filed it under sadness, and I did not look closely, and that is the thing I have to live with, that I had a whole year where looking closely might have been enough, and I chose to call it grief instead, because it was a whole year, near enough, before I heard the knocking. I'd started staying late to catch up the accounts, and Tomas had started staying late too, later than me. And one evening I came back for my phone that I'd left on the bench, and the workshop was dark, except for the one lamp over the freestanding door. And Tomas was sitting on a stool in front of the closed door in the pool of that lamplight, and he was talking, low, easy, the way you talk to someone across a kitchen table. I stopped in the dark by the roller shutter, and I listened, and I could not hear the words, only the shape of them, the rise and fall of a man in conversation, pausing, answering, the give and take of it. And in the pauses, when he stopped and tilted his head the way you do when you're listening, there was a sound from the door. From the closed door in the frame that stood free on the floor with nothing behind it. A soft knocking. Not a knock to come in. A gentle pattern tapping, like knuckles idly drumming on the other side of the wood. The sound a person makes when they're standing at a door talking to someone through it. Comfortable. In no hurry. I did not make a sound. I backed out into the street, and I stood among the bicycles outside the shop across the road with my heart going, and I told myself he had a radio in there, or that the pipes knocked, or that a man alone talks to himself, and I'd imagined the answering. I told myself several things, standing on that loud living street with the buses going by, and not one of them was that my brother was talking through a door to something that tapped back, because you do not let yourself think that about your own brother on an ordinary evening. But I did not go back in that night. I went home. And that is the night I mark as the beginning of knowing, even though I spent months more pretending I didn't. He changed after that, or I finally let myself see that he was changing. He got thinner, and it was not the thinness of illness. He ate, I watched him eat, but he seemed to be spending something that food didn't replace. He stopped seeing the pieces. That was the thing that frightened the business side of me before the rest of me caught up. Tomas, who could walk into a wrecked house and find the one board worth saving, started missing them, walking past good salvage, distracted, his eye gone dull, because his eye was somewhere else. It was on the back of the workshop, on the closed door. All day, even when he was standing in front of me talking about invoices, part of him was listening for the tapping. I started finding 2 cups. He'd make tea in the morning, and there'd be 2 cups, and I'd say, "Who's the other for?" and he'd look at the second cup as if he hadn't made it, and then he'd get a smooth, vague look, a look I have since learned to fear more than any scream, and he'd say, "Force of habit," and pour it out. 2 cups. A chair dragged over near the door. Once, a game of cards laid out on the bench near the frame, a hand dealt to 2 players, one hand played out, and one hand waiting, face down, for someone who wasn't sitting there. He was keeping someone company. My brother was spending his days and his weight and his eye keeping company with whatever stood on the other side of a door that had no other side. I tried once to talk to him plainly. I sat him down at the bakery 2 doors up, in the light and the noise, deliberately in the light and the noise, and I said, "Tomas, what is it with the door?" And he was quiet for a long time over his coffee, and then he told me. And I believe he told me the truth, as he understood it, which is the most frightening version there could be. He said that when he'd carried the door down the servant's stair that last afternoon, he'd heard, as he lifted it out of its frame, a voice on the other side say, "Please don't leave me in here." A woman's voice, he said, soft, frightened, and he'd looked, and there'd been only the blank wall behind where the door had hung, the wall the floor plan had promised, and the door had contradicted, and he'd told himself he imagined it, and he'd taken the door because, he said, and here he looked at me, and his eyes filled, because it would have been cruel to knock down a house around a voice asking not to be left. He'd taken the door to save her, and she'd been grateful. That was the word he used, grateful. She'd been so grateful all this time that he'd carried her out. She just didn't like the door to be open, he said. She got frightened when the door was open. She liked it shut, with him on this side, keeping her company until she was ready. "Ready for what?" I said. And he said, "To come through. She's not strong enough yet. She uses me up a little, keeping her company, that's all. It's what I have to give, and I don't mind giving it. When she's strong enough, she'll come through, and I'll have done a kind thing." He said it the way you'd describe a normal act of decency, the way you'd describe visiting a sick friend, and that was the horror of it, that there was no horror in his face, only a mild, pleased exhaustion, the look of a man doing something good at a cost he decided was worth it. I understood then, sitting in the bakery with the ordinary morning going on around us, what was happening as much as I ever would. The door was not a door to a place. There was no place. The house was gone, demolished, carted away. The servant's stair was rubble under a tram line by then. Whatever the door was, it was not an opening onto anywhere that existed. It was more like a mouth, and my brother was feeding it, patiently, out of kindness, out of the specific soft-hearted decency that had made him unable to leave a plain door in a house that was coming down, that had made him nurse our mother to the end, that had made him the one who saw the piece worth saving. The thing on the other side had found the exact shape of his goodness, and was drinking him through it, a little at a time, and calling it gratitude, and my brother was letting it because it had told him he was being kind. And being kind was the deepest thing in him, deeper than fear. I did the wrong things first. I want to put them down honestly because they are the reason the right thing costs so much. I tried to reason him out of it, and reasoning only made him protective of her, made him defend her to me, made him hide it better. I tried, one night when he'd gone home, to take the door out of the workshop myself, to just load it in the van and be rid of it. And I got it as far as unhooking the brass catch, and the moment the catch was off, before I'd even opened it, the tapping started. And it was not the idle, comfortable tapping from before, it was fast and hard and glad, a delighted drumming, the sound of something that has been waiting a long time and has felt the latch come loose. And I put the catch back with shaking hands, and I did not touch it again for weeks, because I understood that opening it was exactly what it wanted, that the closed door was not the danger. The closed door was the slow version, and open was the fast one. And I tried, worst of all, to wait it out, to hope it would pass, and in that time Tomas got worse, thin and gray and dim-eyed, and I could not tell him from a man dying of an ordinary wasting illness, except that the doctors he humored me by seeing could find nothing, nothing at all. A healthy man, emptying like a bath with the plug pulled. What changed it was Tomas himself, in a moment of clarity that I think cost him enormously, and that I think was the last of the old him surfacing to warn me. It was late, and he was very weak by then, and I'd come to take him home, and he caught my wrist as I helped him up, and he looked at me with his own eyes, his real eyes, clear for a moment, through the dimness, and he said, fast and low, "She's nearly through. When she comes through, she won't need the door. Don't let her have the door when she doesn't need it. Burn it before then. Do it while she still needs it shut. Do you hear me? While she's still on the other side, not after." And then the dimness came back down over his face like water closing, and he smoothed over and said mildly, "Why are you holding my wrist?" And I let go, and I knew I had my instruction, and I knew it was my brother's own hand passing it to me from under the thing that was drowning him, while she still needs it shut, not after. I turned it over all that night. The thing needed the door as long as it was on the other side, needed it as the channel, the mouth, the way through. Once it came fully through into our side, it would not need the door any more, and then destroying the door would be destroying nothing, an empty frame, and the thing would be loose and fed and strong and here. The window was not after it came through. The window was now, while it was still bound to the wood, still dependent on the closed door, still on the far side of it. And the way to end it was not to open the door and not to keep it forever shut, both of which fed it in their different ways, but to destroy the door while the thing was still inside its dependence on it, to burn the channel with the thing still committed to the far side of it. I did not do it in the workshop. I was afraid of fire in the workshop, and I was more afraid, I'll admit, of being in that closed space with it when I began. I took the door out to the river, to the old barge slip below the tannery, where nobody goes, on a cold, clear night, in the middle of the living city, with its lights all around me on the far bank. And I want that noted, too, that even the ending happened where the city could see, that there was traffic on the bridge, upstream the whole time. I loaded the door and its frame into the van while Tomas slept, drugged with the sleep of a man near the end, and I drove it down to the slip, and I built a fire. It fought me. Not with hands, it had no hands, but the tapping started the moment I lifted the frame from the van, and it went through every register it had. It began glad, that fast, delighted drumming, thinking, I believe, that the movement meant it was being let through at last. And when it felt the cold air of the river and the fire's heat, it changed. It knocked slow and pleading, the soft, frightened woman's rhythm Tomas must have heard on the stair, "Please don't leave me in here." And I nearly stopped, because it was so exactly the sound of someone being abandoned, so precisely pitched to the soft-hearted part of a person, the part it had eaten my brother through. And I understood, kneeling by the fire with the matches in my hand, that this was the whole of its method, that it did not force anyone. It only ever asked to be pitied and was fed by the pity, and that the kindest people were the ones it starved to death. My brother had been chosen for his goodness. It was choosing me the same way, right then, with that pleading, banking on the family resemblance. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done, which was to be, for one night, not kind. I put the door in the fire while it was begging me not to. I held it down in the flames with a length of iron railing from our own stock while it knocked and drummed, and finally, at the end, made a sound that was not knocking at all, a long, thin sound through the burning wood that I will not try to describe, because describing it would be inviting it back. And I kept it in the fire, on the far side, in its dependence, until the door was gone, until the frame was gone, until there was nothing left but embers and the brass hinges, which I raked out and threw as far as I could into the black water of the river, one and then the other, and heard them gone. The tapping stopped, not faded, stopped, cleanly, the way a held breath stops, and the night was only the night, the traffic on the bridge, the water, the cold, the city lit up and indifferent on the far bank, and I sat by the embers until they died, because I did not trust them to be only embers, and then I drove home in the gray before dawn. Tomas woke that morning hungry. That is how I knew. He woke, and he was hungry, ordinary hungry, and he ate 2 breakfasts, and complained the tea was weak, and there was color coming back into him already, faint but real, the bath filling instead of emptying. He did not remember the door. He does not remember it now. He remembers the house on Aldous Row and the carved mahogany doors we sold to the hotel. And he remembers, dimly, being ill that year, and the doctors finding nothing. And he has decided it was a virus, and I have let him decide that, because there is no kindness in giving him back the memory of the thing he was being drained by. And I have learned the hard way, at the river, exactly how much a kindness is worth, and exactly when to spend it and when not to. He is well now. It took months, and he is older than he was, the way you're older after a long illness, but he sees the pieces again. Last week he walked into a wrecked chapel we'd been called to, and picked out a single carved corbel among the wreckage, and held it up, and grinned at me, the old grin, the seeing grin, and I had to turn away and pretend to check the van because I could not let him see my face. I kept nothing from it. No hinge, no splinter, no photograph. And there was never any paper worth keeping, only that one floor plan that had shown a door where the wall was blank. And I burned that too, in the same fire, because I did not want any object left that the thing could use as a road back, and I have come to believe, without being able to prove it, that these things travel by objects, that they need a thing to be bound to, a door, a hinge, a splinter, and that if you leave nothing, you leave no road. So, I left nothing. I will end where I can actually end, which is the thing I have that none of the frightening stories seem to allow, a real ending paid for. The door is gone. The thing that came out of the house on Aldous Row is gone with it, burned on the far side of its own dependence before it could come through, exactly as my brother in his last clear moment told me to do it. He does not know he saved himself by warning me. He thinks he had a virus. He is downstairs in the workshop right now. I can hear him, moving stock around and singing along badly to the woman upstairs, doing her scales, alive and hungry and seeing. And the cost of that was one night of not being kind to something that begged me, and I would pay it again. And that is the whole of what I learned, that goodness is the thing they hunt you by, and that once in your life you may have to be hard as iron to the sound of someone pleading, and that the trick, the only trick, is knowing which sound is worth your kindness and which one is only the shape your kindness makes when something hungry has learned to wear it.